Welcome to Earth Impulse.
Claudia, good morning.
Good morning, Christine.
And I'm supposed to say good afternoon to you, aren't I?
Well, it's all linear time. Meaningless nowadays.
Definitely. Oh my God. All right. I think this is going to be a follow-up to our last video where we were bringing out some of the more, I'll call it what I feel it is, strongly factual information about what happened during World War I and II based on documentation. So I know that it was pressing a deep, deep place in me. And the emotion that we were both feeling was pretty palpable.
Yeah.
I also know that it has provoked in some people one of those what the fuck moments. Like, what? Like, what? Like, what? You know, so I just want to say one thing to anybody that hears this, that listened to our previous what do you want to call it? I guess it's just our conversation about World War II, Germany, Hitler, the Third Reich. And we're looking at it from a multiple point of view stance, including the work of David Irving. And I want to say that we're not looking at just one person's work. We've been studying this material now for years. And Claudia, because of her German background and her German language, has access to a lot of things that the English-speaking world doesn't have. So what started out as a deep intuitive feeling has turned into a research project of sorts. And so that being said, we're not trying to make a case of right or wrong here.
No.
What we're endeavoring to do is bring forth information that is normally hidden from the public, or people just haven't found it yet. We're all, if we look at everybody within this loosely grouped research community, because that's in a way we all are researchers, we all come across information at different points in time. And so we're just trying to do our part in bringing forth what we feel is verifiable. But today we're going to talk about something that isn't verifiable.
Exactly.
Right? And this is a hard approach in a way, because we're taking from intuitive gnosis, memories that each of us individually has had, and we're going to move into the unseen esoteric realms of the Third Reich.
Let's go.
Okay. And so just to say that, because what really came to us as a question, and it's always been there all along, but it just finally got verbalized, World War II isn't just about money. There was a huge amount of technology. Many researchers, scientists, studies of all sorts, of the most despicable kind, and also of, let's just call it, the highest realm kind, endeavoring, and I will say this, to understand the mechanisms of creation. So this has to take us into physics, metaphysical studies, alchemy, sacred geometry. Everything kind of collides here in this point. So for me, at this point of view, World War II is about dominating this technology, which is spiritual.
In a nutshell, yes.
Okay. So, Claudia, you, I know, have done a lot of research into the WWII and into the Tool Society.
Mm-hmm.
It is well documented that the Third Reich was going to Tibet, the Antarctic, and other places on the planet, searching for what?
Well, rumor has it that they were searching for entrances to the inner earth.
Mm-hmm.
Which kind of is a whole can of worms. Is it really the inner earth, or is it the actual earth? Because what we live in here is only a simulation.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't help but wonder, why did the world, or the Allied forces, the cabal, try to wipe out the entire German nation? And the Germans are not the only ones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they did it with most of the indigenous people, they did it with the Irish, and they've been doing it with the Germans.
Mm-hmm.
So there has to be a lot more than meets the eye.
Mm-hmm.
And why did so many Germans disappear literally off the face of the earth?
Can you tell me a little bit more about that? Like, where is that written about, or how is that knowledge obtained?
Well, it's well known by now that Hitler did not commit suicide in 1945,
Mm-hmm.
for starters, but apparently nobody knows what happened, where he went. But in, I think it was 1938, the army Admiral Dönitz said publicly something along the lines that he was very proud to have found I don't remember the wording exactly, but something like he was proud to have found a paradise that is inaccessible to the enemy in case things go wrong. It was something like that. And this was just after the expedition to Antarctica. Now, we know that the Germans had submarines that were at least 50 years ahead in time, technology-wise, to any other nation. We know they had flying objects that were far ahead in time of any other nation. There is plenty of documentation from old newspapers, including the New York Times, about so-called Foo Fighters, for example.
Right. Just for anybody that hasn't done their own research, the Foo Fighters or the Nazi Bell would be flying devices that were not propelled by and had wings as airplanes, right?
Right.
Okay, so they're basically, well, I'll just say what I understand. They're anti-gravitational devices and craft.
Yeah. And the submarines were independent of water depth. They could dive a lot deeper than any US submarine, for example, and for much longer.
Okay, so we're looking at the Third Reich had access to technologies far, far in advance of anything that was being used during the war. I mean,
Yeah.
the war was fought with guns and bombs and tanks and planes and all of that. So it seems that there was a rush for technology here, a fight for technology.
There was. I mean, but even by the time the war started, the Germans were already far ahead with what we today call alternative technology.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, Schauberger said, I think it was in 1923, Schauberger pointed out that generally the engineers were moving everything the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
And he was referring to anything based on the principle of explosion is satanic, which would perfectly explain why free energy is still being throttled now.
Right. Because free energy, we'll get into that because this is where I'm coming from at this moment. Maybe we'll leave that a little towards the end of the conversation. But free energy basically is, well, let's just call it plasma field dynamics for the moment, just to give it a name. Freely available energy that is an implosion factor versus an explosion factor. We're not using nuclear fusion, we're not using combustion, we're not using any of the things that we currently understand as energy sources. Mm-hmm. Right? And so, and it's really obvious. I mean, I'll just throw this in real quick. It's really obvious that anybody that's broadened their studies will see that, certainly in the late 1800s, early 1900s, many brilliant minds came onto the planet. And all of this was being brought out. We mostly hear about Nikola Tesla or different larger names, but there was a huge force here right now on the planet ready to give to humanity, really, this knowledge.
Yep.
And apparently humanity chose not to accept it. So let's go back now to Hitler and the Third Reich. And this is where I feel we are right now in consciousness. We're revisiting something. I think this is why this subject is so vital to really dig into, is that we have a choice to make as a humanity right now. Are we going to war again? Or are we going to embrace consciousness as energy? And I think this is where we get really deep into what was happening in the Third Reich, and probably other places on the planet too, is that they had accessed this free energy source.
They had figured it out through applying natural law, basically.
Mm-hmm.
They knew the principles of natural law and applied them, and I don't like using the term raise their consciousness, but I guess that's probably the best way to describe it. And that's how they were able to access these alternative means to, travel and energy and so on.
Mm-hmm. So really to understand this is we need to put into view what is currently known. A lot of people will say it was ET tech, that ETs came to help the Germans, and a lot of people view ETs as the negative.
Yes, there are plenty of rumors flying around about the beings from Aldebaran helping the Germans.
Okay.
Because initially the mediums of the Vril Society were through automatic writing, channeling instructions to build these machines.
Okay. So let's just sit with that for a minute. I feel there is so much confusion, and actually what we're looking at is quite much simpler. That all of these has been a great distraction, including the war, was a great distraction of destruction, to simply not allow humanity to have access to this. Now, we can say it came from an alien race. It's one way to say it. We can say it came from our consciousness in a future timeline. We know all these things are now the makeup and the fabric of our reality. We know that we're in hyperdimensional, multidimensional space. I can say that and people might go, well, what are you talking about? I said, well, just go ahead and start looking at plasma physics, or start looking at, the sacred geometries. It's been written in our consciousness forever.
Absolutely.
It's not anything new, but we haven't accessed it. And if we look at it, we've been prevented from accessing it. So we have a knowledge that Hitler's great interest in the ancient teachings of the Buddhists of the Tibet, of all of the, let's just call them, these are the preserved, let's call it sacred knowledge. There have always been those on the planet preserving it. Mm-hmm. And the planet herself preserves it. So, we have to look at underneath what might have been going on there and get rid of the personalities and get rid of the he said, she said, what's right, what's wrong. Because if we even start to understand time and angles of perception, you're only going to see a slice of it if you're looking at it in a linear fashion.
Absolutely.
So we must move out of a flat plane of existence into a hyperdimensional space. And then we have to break out of a box. And that box is called duality. And I'm going to just say this right now because it's very clear in my mind. If you look at us as being in a cube, it is always a reflection. Every surface reflects the other inside that cube. We have the immediate polar opposite fields. But if you spin the cube, and if you get that spin on that cube to the hyperdimensional space of the cube, you have now merged those two fields. And I am starting to feel that this is the propulsion mechanism of consciousness, and it's also the propulsion mechanism that they were bringing in from this knowledge and why they were able to make flying machines.
Yes, absolutely.
So, I feel this is so vital, Claudia. There's a historical aspect of it. And I think that's very necessary because there's been an obvious distortion. And people make mistakes all the time, as far as I can tell, by carelessly using words and labels.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one.
Mm-hmm. So, going back to that, your feelings. Okay, we've talked about real before, and we've talked about the hollow earth and the inner earth, and we've talked about some of these things. So really, to speak about them, we have to get out of physicality.
Exactly.
And go into hyperdimensional space.
Yeah, and it's not easy to find words.
Well, yeah, we know that. So, if the Third Reich, and I'm using the word if because I'm going to leave it as an open proposition or question to any listener, had access to hyperdimensional space. And they were actually creating craft. You would say that the cabal or the life-sucking parasitical forces would have to stop that at all costs if it wanted to keep a control structure on the planet.
Yes, also because that would be very much pro-life. Because it would basically give all of humanity complete independence, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm. Right, because this is what I'm understanding, and I am so fortunate to be in contact with so many people that are doing this work. It comes down to something actually simplistic. And I want to say this also because a lot of people, when they look at history, whether it's Sumeria, the Anunnaki, the Egyptians, and now let's go to modern history, World War I, World War II, okay, which is deeply impacting us still. We have not resolved this. We tend to look at it from here back to there. And so we're looking at a distortion because the only way we can understand an event in a time and space is to put ourselves back there.
Yeah.
You cannot judge a past action by a present day point of view. Because what you're doing is you're bringing a fast forward amount of consciousness, indoctrination, belief systems right along with you when you look back at that point in time. And we've talked about this before. So it becomes really vital that we go into our feeling memory body because we are memory itself and really go deep into what was happening in that moment, what brought forth this war, how was it manipulated, what lessons do we need to learn from it, without getting stuck in this, he killed, she killed, I killed, you killed point of view. It was a massive destructive event for all of humanity.
Exactly.
Massively. And if we take our current point of view, when we look at the cabal and we say they're destroying the very thing that can set us free. So if we just take that for a moment and hold it in our minds, and we look at the German people, and we look at bloodlines, not from the point of view of we're a homogenized race, but we look at bloodlines and blood markers. And this is not a prejudicial thing. Every race brought in something unique and special. Every race did. And yet we have, if we look at the Native American of today and the battle going on in Standing Rock, North Dakota, and if we look at the Celts and we look at the Druids and we look at, let's call them the root races on the planet.
Exactly. The original tribes.
Exactly. The root races. Each of them carry a special, let's say, energetic bloodline marker. None of this was by mistake. So I'm going to say very clearly here from my own understanding, and I do not tell anybody they have to think like I think or see what I see, that what actually Adolf Hitler was trying to get across and trying to protect was his root race. And he was wanted, and he professed it many times if you really listen to what he said, that every root race had a right, had a place on this planet in its own time. So yes, he was against racial mixing to some extent because he saw the dilution that was coming. Now, the fact is we're at a very diluted state. We all have right now all the races in us for the most part, including the archonic markers. But what we can do is go into that bloodline because it is a memory channel. And we can bring out of it what is an Aryan. You see, people don't go far enough when they start looking into things. And you told me the other day what it is. It's a developed character.
Yeah.
It is. So, it's not about color of skin. It's not about the color of your eyes or your hair.
There's nothing to do with this, but since you mentioned this, okay, why is it that according to the so-called society we live in, blondes are known to be stupid, the Irish are known to be thick, and the Native Americans are known to be alcoholics?
Because we're looking at the distortion and the inversion.
Exactly.
As we're not going to get to true communion until we look past all of this and we look deeper inside. And we keep playing out these same stupid, idiotic games for a predator who has inverted our reality. And I will suggest to anybody who is in search of truth, as soon as you find something that you think is true, invert it. And look at it from as many sides as you possibly can.
Yes, exactly. And I promise you, life becomes really interesting. You never have a bored moment again.
Exactly. So really this is what we're giving forward from what we're talking about, because we're actually up against one of the primary inversions. And it was done through trauma and death. The very people that say they were here to protect humanity from this horrible ass threat, that was going to take over the world, are the very beings that took over the world.
Yep.
So that right there gives one that's seeking or searching for truth pause. And I don't even want to use race terms anymore, Claudia.
No, I mean, we are all spirits inhabiting human bodies, so,
Exactly. So even I will go so far as to say, because humanity chose such, this is the exact thing that had to happen, and this is exactly where we are today. We're a
Oh
mixed-blooded single race.
yeah.
And so I can, as one single solitary being, tap into all those races, including the ET ones.
Absolutely.
And I don't need an expert or an authority out there writing thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of dissertation. Sorry.
No,
Okay.
we don't need that.
No, I mean, it's a great service because it's bringing forward a single, if there's a researcher out there, it can be anyone, and there are many, and I actually honor all of them. They're bringing forward from within their own memory banks, and they're putting out from their perspective. It's unique. At some point, my perspective crosses with theirs. And when those two moments cross, then I have something that I go, oh, okay. That's where I cross with what I'm an angle of perception. You're an angle of perception. You're an angle of perception. You're an angle of perception. And it's when they cross is that I say, now there is a possibility for truth. The cross,
Yes.
the cross, the very symbol of the cross. You see, so by looking at Adolf Hitler, the Third Reich, current history, repeating history, aren't we all tired of the repeating fucking history?
I know I am.
I mean, it's an old game.
And it's been done so many times. It's, it's really high time that we learn from it.
Precisely. So let's go back a minute to hyperdimensional space technologies. So what Adolf Hitler is quoted as saying that he was, I don't remember exactly the words, but had the great pleasure of knowing that there was a place where the enemies couldn't get to him.
Yes.
And most people would probably say, oh, well, there's tunnels under the earth, which there's millions of them. I mean, we know that now too. There's a massive amount of
take rocket science to figure out.
Right.
Yeah, that's not what they were talking about. Exactly. And we know that too.
Right. So if we're looking at reverberations of a resonance of realities into the hyperdimensional space, we're moving from, let's just say, first dimension, second dimension, third dimension, fourth dimension, fifth dimension, sixth dimension, seventh. Okay. All of those, for it to be actually true, has to have a resonance one on the other. One precedes the other follows the other. It's in a constant movement and flux up and down through dimensional space.
Mm-hmm.
So, like a cell in my body at this level, at this dimension looks solid, but it's anything but solid in the next dimension up. And we can keep moving up through the dimensional aspects of space. So space-time. Well, space. If Adolf Hitler was able to access hyperdimensional space, and they were actually bringing in technology that was using that knowledge, we have to look at it a little differently. And we're looking at not somebody who won a war, somebody whose great love, and I will say that, for his people, okay, who he felt were his root race, was literally almost wiped off the face of the planet.
Yep.
And so do each of us individually and together have the ability to tap into that memory field and find out what was being hidden there?
I think we are very close to that, actually.
Mm-hmm. So let's give one example, Baphomet. Okay? See, for truth to be truth, it has to line up, and I keep saying this, and I got this so beautifully from Jeffrey and his studies of metabiology. It has to match all across dimensional time and space.
Yeah.
You can't invent an equation or you go, oops, like they do in, quantum mechanics. They go, well, up at that level, it structures out fine mathematically, but down at this level, it doesn't work at all. Thank you, Jeffrey, for pointing this out to me. You know, so it's like what we, as a conscious being, we can start to imagine, first of all, but look into is when we look into a subject, especially one of such great controversy and trauma, what lines up here? What makes sense here? What common sense denominator can we put onto this with all we know right now?
Good question.
I mean, for me, it's actually comes a little bit simplistic. There are forces for good and evil. There are positive and negative poles of existence. There is a duality in a box.
And there's pro-life and anti-life.
Mm-hmm. But
I think that's what it comes down to when we talk about Hitler. Yeah. I mean, he made how many attempts to maintain peace before during 1939? Yeah. And then probably equal amounts of attempts to end the war as early as possible, and not necessarily in favor of the country known as Germany in terms of geography. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. He was vegetarian because he could not bear the thought to have an animal killed for him. Mm-hmm. He did a whole lot of stuff that had never been heard of before, such as making sure that every family can have an annual holiday. That strikes me all as very pro-life.
Mm-hmm. And he did the one cardinal sin for anything on the cabal side. He tried to create a separate economy.
Well, he did create.
Yeah, just as Gaddafi did, right? Yeah. I mean, it's the same story. And for me, I don't need to know much more than that. Sure, they're all human beings and they all made mistakes and they all had, we all have it in us. We're not at a perfected state. But when I see that pattern, that tells me what I really need to know to further go in deeper here. Mm-hmm. Because it's not about politics. It's not even really about race. It's about freedom. It's about freedom to choose. And if you have a nation like Libya or, the Third Reich, which actually more, Austria wanted into the Third Reich, there were troops in Hitler's army, Arabs, Romanians, Gypsies, Jews,
Tibetans.
Right? What does this say? This is a man that wants to wipe out all the races on the earth and say the Aryan white race is supreme? I'm sorry, no. And he is seen, and there's photos and there's documents of this, of him going to these different nations and promoting them that they kept their own knowledge base intact.
Absolutely.
So we're trying to bust apart a big, huge deception here by truth. Does that mean that he was a perfect being? No. Does that mean that people within his SS ranks, because we know that there are corrupt beings all across the planet, that given a certain amount of power over didn't abuse it? No. Of course there was these things happened. The world was at a state of war. But we have to expand our view here and not just listen to the single point of view that is so bound into our mind control factors of indoctrination.
Yeah.
And really, Claudia, the more I understand right here, right now, all the technology that's available to humans right now, and this is the key though, when we raise our consciousness, this isn't dependent on somebody giving it to us or bringing it to us.
Hell no.
We have to raise our consciousness to that level. And you said it in the last piece, and I'm glad some people heard you, to the field of the invisible light within the dark. What does that mean? I mean, I put it out there so people will meditate on that.
Yeah, or at least ponder it.
Yes. And so let's put Baphomet right up. Okay. I got a little triggered by an interview I'd heard the other day. You know, when somebody said Baphomet was just a cartoon character and was false and not true. And I looked at it and I go, no, no, that's not true. Hidden within that dark image that we've come to see as the devil incarnate is all the esoteric keys.
Yes,
And
let's
so,
go into the original meaning.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah, according to the Thule Temple, which is a German website, or rather a website in German, the original form is Akkadian or Babylonian, and it's actually called Bab Kome, which translates roughly into portal to the light. And then it was initially it was translated into ancient Persian, then into Arabic, then into Greek, and eventually into Latin. So it became Baphomet by the time it reached Latin. And what the word initially really stands for is the invisible sun, Ilum, also known as the black sun.
Okay, so stop right here. All of those terms, Baphomet, the black sun, when we relate the black sun to Nazi, all of those terms have been deemed evil.
Yeah.
So let's invert it. What is hiding there? What sacred piece of knowledge that in actuality today, science has all over the planet shown exactly what we're talking about. And I'm going to say it in my terms because I can't say it in mathematics. It's high rate velocity spin. It's an eminent, when one particle, it becomes its own generator of light. It's high velocity spin. And it's in the invisible field. And it includes the dynamics of electromagnetism and gravity. And so it's like looking at it through esoteric eyes is one way of explaining it. But see, the dark aspect or the controls, that have been put on this is that this is the inversion. It becomes the manifestation of evil. It's to keep people from looking there.
Yeah, same concept as Lucifer, Satan.
Exactly. Right? Don't look there. It's evil. Flesh is evil. Women are evil. All of these things, it's to invert them. Now, in a duality that we're living in this physical 3D impression, okay, is that once you implode the duality fields within yourself, you are now at a spin rate that hits the invisible light. We're approaching invisible light right now.
Yep.
And this is why it's so essential for people to start unplugging from so many of these belief systems, identifiers, names, and stories. Because I'm for sure now that every researcher out there is telling only a line of his own story.
Oh, yeah.
He is revealing or she is revealing her own story. Because as soon as consciousness starts to search for something, it's actually searching for itself. And so it's never going to come from an outside source. Another way of saying it. I can listen to 100 different videos, and each one of them is going to inform me of something. And inside of me is the one that's going to go, that's where that intersects with me.
Mm-hmm.
And if I get out of the personalities and the identities that I'm looking at, I don't have to fret any longer. And this is, that's why I feel like this single, speaking of what happened in World War II Germany, World War I, World War II, because they go hand in hand. If we do not unlock this right now, we are being propelled into World War III on the same exact modality.
Yes. Absolutely.
So I open up, we have there's many researchers out there that are keep talking about Nazi. I'm sorry.
Yes.
Nazi.
It's so true.
Luciferian agenda. And I'm just like, I want to take a cosmic frying pan to their heads.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're going to use a term like that is so charged, that term in itself is a gravity field.
Oh, yes, especially since, there are so many nowadays who have thrown in the original National Socialists with the Zionists.
Exactly.
People, those are polar opposites.
Okay, and they are. And so if we look at them, invert them, and then flip them again, and flip them again, and flip them again. Don't get stuck in one of the dynamics, but do understand it. Do not do not be so easily confused.
Yeah.
These were enemies, okay, to put it one way. In another reality, and in another dimensional space, it was something totally different. Here on this planet, in this 3D reality, it was destructive and horrible and tragedy beyond tragedies. And that tragedy beyond tragedies is trying to repeat right now. On another dimensional space, you can see a much bigger part of how this was playing out.
Yeah.
So, it is inherent to us to be able to decipher this and not get hauled in again. Because there are no other hands but our hands doing this on the planet. There are no other hands but our hands.
Exactly. Were those the warning sirens?
Yeah. We get free sound effects here. Oh my God, Claudia. I don't really know what else to say, because if you...
No, I think we've shared enough food for thought for now.
Okay.
I really do, because somebody who's not familiar with this, will have a lot to chew on.
Mm-hmm.
That's my feeling.
Okay, so just to make it, in a way, all the complexity that's around us, all the hyperdimensional chambers, the hall of mirrors in which most people are still reflecting. The only way to get out of that hall of mirrors, or house of horrors, really, no matter how much you think it's all good and you're staying in the good and the beautiful, you're denying the destruction that's going on, and you're therefore facilitating it.
Yeah.
If you can start to hold those 2 points of view, or as many points of view as possible within your own sphere, you will start to spin and get out of this box. And it's all in the heart solar plexus.
I want to add something here.
Mm-hmm.
And that is, stop reacting.
Mm-hmm.
Make a conscious effort to not react.
Mm-hmm. Put your brain.
Someone calling you an asshole, just shrug.
Yeah. And if you react, take it inside you and find out why you're reacting.
Exactly.
Because it has nothing to do with you if you don't let it.
Because that's a really, really good way to kind of grow your consciousness.
Right. So another way of putting it is stay in the now moment. Another way of putting it is, fertilizing your own gravitational field of your own truth.
Mm-hmm.
Right? We are going to draw to us exactly what we need. And if we are still as a mass of humanity needing to have experience war, we will have war. If people do not implode both the negative and the positive fields within themselves and start dissolving this, it's going to play itself out again. Maybe not for everybody. There is people talk about a new earth and people talk about mitosis and the splitting off of the earth and everything. I see it much more is that we're a toroidal field and we're turning ourselves inside out in a continuous motion.
Mm-hmm, exactly.
And when we get back to continuous motion, fluid state of being, now we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
So anything that causes us to react is actually to freeze frame us. It freezes us in a reality.
Yes, and we need to use it as a tool instead.
Mm-hmm. Certainly. I've played all the games, okay? And so it's just becomes apparent over time. You go, I'm letting somebody else create my reality for me. And certainly that was happening to a great extent, for many, many incarnations. So this goes right back to, keep going full circle. We are the creators of this reality, consciously or subconsciously, awake or asleep. Do you choose? I recommend being awake. I can experience the deepest sorrow and the most sublime joy, and they're both the same to me. They're like they're the two sides.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So my sorrow turns to joy and then my joy turns to sorrow because when I look at what's happening on the planet, there's great sorrow there.
Absolutely.
Hang on just a second. I'm pausing. Oh, never mind. I was so unprepared for this talk today, Claudia.
It's okay.
Yeah.
We did all right.
Yeah. So.
And now I'm going to ride a dragon.
I know. Did you love that dragon?
I did.
I thought you would. I'm going to stop our recording now. Many, 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 many blessings to all. Love you.
Love you.